From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
With the elections in the rearview mirror, the Providence City Council will see a leadership change come January. This as they are poised to tackle some big issues like the proposed Fain Tower and a push to monetize the water supply in order to shore up the city's beleaguered finances. This week on the first half of Newsmakers, City Council President David Salvatore. Then, after 14 often grueling years as president of the Providence Firefighters Union, Paul Dowdy has officially passed the baton. The veteran firefighter was front and center during pension reform 6 years ago. Did it go far enough? Our guest on the second half of Newsmakers, Paul Dowdy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nisi is off this week. Council President David Salvatore, thank you very much for joining us again on the program. It's always good to have you.
Thanks for having me back.
I want to start with the Fain Tower proposal. We are taping this program on a Friday morning. Last night, the City Council voted to approve a zoning change that would allow a developer to build the state's largest skyscraper, 46-story tower called Hope Point Tower. We're going to get into the vote in a minute, but honestly, most people sitting at home right now, they sort of know about the tower, they've seen the headlines, and they likely have a basic question. So I'll ask you the question.
Sure.
Is this thing going to get built?
I can't answer that. I think that's contingent upon the developer. He did petition the city and the city council for a zoning change to our comprehensive plan and to our zoning laws. So as you stated, it did reach a first passage last night out of the city council. We have, as you know, a dual passage system in our legislative branch. So subsequent to second passage, at that point, there are several other steps that have to be taken, but I'm not convinced at this point that the developer is going to move forward with this project.
You were one of two city council members that abstained from voting on this one. How come? I
was really disappointed with some of my colleagues who stifled some discussion on the city council floor. So out of principle, I did abstain. The city council is responsible for delivering information that we deliberate in our meetings to the public. So I didn't think from a transparency perspective and providing the public with the information that they need to make an educated decision.
So why didn't you vote it down? Vote it down and force more information to come forward in further hearings.
So I've been very public in my opposition to the project in that particular location. But again, out of principle, for the first time during my tenure on the city council members refused to answer questions that my colleagues presented to them on the council floor. I think that's detrimental to public process and providing, again, the public with the information that they need to make a decision. Well, look,
not to beat a dead horse here, but detrimental to the public process. Aren't you shirking your responsibility as an elected official and doing an up or down vote on an issue?
I think I've, again, been very clear on my position on this, and out of principle, I did abstain.
So as you said, you've opposed it. What would make you support the plan?
I have provided alternate locations to the Hope Point Tower. I think there are several locations in our downtown that are more suitable for this particular project. I'm still not convinced that there's a market for these luxury units. I'm hearing that rents could be upwards of $5,500. That's clearly not a market for those rents in Providence. And quite frankly, we have an affordable housing issue in our capital city, whether it be low to moderate income housing or workforce housing, which I think gets lost in the housing conversation. Workforce housing being middle class jobs that pay $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. I can't think of any public safety officials, teachers, white-collar workers, and blue-collar workers who can afford $5,500 rents in Providence.
So before we get into the affordable housing question, when you say you're worried about whether or not the building could get filled, what you're saying is you're worried we could have a modern Superman building on our hands.
Sure, and as you know, we have struggled to fill 111 Westminster Street.
Which isn't residential, we should say, but...
It's not residential. It was a single tenant for many decades, a single tenant payer. I am open to a mixed-use development, but as you know, that is going to require significant subsidies, and I think we run the risk of another empty tower in our downtown, which I think sends the wrong message to the rest of the country who might want to do business in our capital city.
The city, one of your colleagues last night, correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't there, but read Dan McGowan, said that the developer should be required to put, I think, 15% of affordable housing units in the Fain Tower. Sounds like you support that.
I supported the amendment.
As council president, why didn't you push that harder earlier on if that's so important to you?
Well, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had on a citywide basis, not only in the Hope Point Tower. The state of Rhode Island is projecting that there is a 30,000 unit affordable housing shortfall over the next decade. So obviously we need to have a comprehensive conversation, I think, about affordable housing citywide and statewide for that matter. And it shouldn't only surround the Hope Point Tower. The Hope Point Tower, again, unsustainable rents. I'm not convinced that the project is financially feasible. However, I am willing to look at other locations in our downtown.
Affordable housing is an issue, not just Providence, Rhode Island, the entire Northeast, the entire region. Let's shift gears here. Water Supply Board. The mayor is pushing to lease or monetize in some way the Water Supply Board. The idea would be to use the money to put toward the city's staggering $1 billion unfunded pension debt. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted a debate between Mayor Elorza, who won re-election, and his challenger, Dee Whitman. And I want to play a quick soundbite from that debate when we were talking about the Water Supply Board. Here's what the mayor had to say.
If we don't do something big, and the only option that I see available right now is indeed leasing the Water Supply Board, the city of Providence is going to die a slow and steady, painful death. Over the next 10 years, what we're going to have is increased taxes and decreased services.
So slow and painful death. Those are pretty strong words. Is the mayor right about the dire straits of finances, or is he using a scare tactic to garner support for leasing the water supply? I
don't think it's a scare tactic. I was very close to the issue during my first term on the city council. As you know, I was part of a team that examined the pension system, which is now a over $1 billion unfunded liability. I will say that the changes that were made during my first term on the council with the help of taxpayers, city employees, our nonprofits, made a big difference in terms of the changes or what we'll see in our pension system in several years.
You're missing one other big element: a very good economy.
A very good economy
has helped out on that.
Fair enough, but I think the changes that were made, we'll see those changes come to fruition in the next several years, such as suspending the 5% and 6% very unaffordable compounded COLAs. And again, working with our retirees and our employees, we were able to make those systemic changes. With that said, I do support monetizing our water supply system in Providence. I've always believed that it's not fair for the city of Providence not to be able to achieve a profit off of our water when we sell it to other municipalities at wholesale who can then turn around and then sell it at a profit.
And that might be true, but I think the challenge for city leaders is this looks to be dead on arrival at the General Assembly. So what are the other ideas, or is it just monetize Water Supply Board or bankruptcy for the city of Providence?
Well, I think we have to continue growing our tax base. I don't think we can continue going back to taxpayers and asking them for more money for less services. So that's first and foremost. We have to continue growing our local economy. Secondly, I think the long-term situation of our finances could be characterized as in dire straits. I agree with the mayor. With an unfunded pension liability of $1 billion, keep in mind, even if we do lease the Water Supply Board and there is this infusion of cash that we can put into the pension system, that only reduces the unfunded liability to around $700 million. Okay, that's on the high side. So while I do support that, I think the city has to take other approaches to getting out of its long-term fiscal challenges.
Let me just shift back to the Fane Tower, if I could. Councilman Zurier estimated this could be an $80 million tax break for the developer. I think that's the first time we've heard a number like that be used in the context of Fane Tower. Is Zurier right? Could they get an $80 million tax break?
The tax stabilization agreement, based on the estimates that he provided and what we know, yes.
How do you feel about it?
Look, I've been a strong supporter of growing our local economy through tax stabilization agreements because our commercial property tax rate is the fourth highest in the country for mid-sized cities, similar to Providence. So I support that incentive. However, I think we have to be thoughtful and smart about the development that we choose. And there's been a lot of talk about the tax revenue that will be brought in. I'm not convinced that the City of Providence will be collecting that based on the project itself, because I'm not convinced that it's financially feasible. So I'm not sure how much we'll be collecting in taxes while giving away $80 million in lost tax revenue.
Let's shift the conversation to you. Curious why you decided not to run again as City Council President.
So as you know, I've had the city's best interests, the entire city's best interest at heart from day one on the City Council, and I truly enjoy representing the neighborhood that elected me, but also representing the city as a whole. With that said, I think it's very important to have a cohesive working so-called leadership team on the City Council. And I was disappointed over the last year at some of the actions of my colleagues. So I am willing to work with anybody on the City Council, but it's important for me to have a cohesive and working relationship with a leadership team. For me, it's not about a title, it's not about an office, it's about the best interest of the city. And I think the president of the City Council needs a strong supporting cast around him or her.
So does that mean you felt like you didn't have that? So the numbers weren't there as you read the tea leaves, you didn't think you would have enough support to get to be City Council President again?
Well, I think it's more about having a working relationship. And as you know, we're going to have a majority female City Council, which I think is a wonderful thing. I think
votes in January, correct?
Votes in January, and I think our legislative body should be reflective of the constituencies that we represent. So again, for me, I don't have to hold the title. I don't have to have the office to be effective and to work on issues that are important to me and my constituents. Again, I was a little disappointed at some of the issues that we took on.
Expand on that. You've said that 3 times now. So
Sure.
what is the biggest thing that's disappointed you? And I guess, hey, who?
Yeah. So I think voting down an ethics ordinance that would hold any City Council member who is under indictment, hold that individual accountable by not allowing him or her to hold a position in leadership on the City Council. For that to be voted down by my colleagues on the City Council sent a message to the constituencies that we represent that it's okay if you break the law while holding a leadership position.
All right, so let's talk about the mayor's position. That Mayor Elorza just won his 2nd term. City of Providence, so everyone understands, is term limited. Would you consider a run for mayor in 4 years?
I'm not going to rule anything out in 4 years. For me, public service is about making the greatest impact in the position that you're running for. So I do have a young family. We're raising a 7-month-old as we speak. But for me, again, it's not about a title or an office. It's where I can make the biggest difference and greatest impact. I think too many times elected officials or prospective elected officials get caught up with a title or, being a career politician. I don't want to be that politician. I want to be the person who's going to make the greatest impact for the constituencies that I represent, and I'm not going to rule anything out.
You certainly have a long time to decide, but not putting words in your mouth, it sounds like you are open to it.
I am.
Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. I'm always curious when someone is leaving a position like yours, what was the biggest thing that surprised you about being City Council President?
So over the last year, I conducted I conducted a review of City Council spending within our office, and it was striking that there was so much mismanagement, and we're talking about, by the way, de minimis amounts of money in the grand scheme of things. But it was really disappointing and striking to see the mismanagement and the lack of internal controls in the City Council office related to finances. I think our constituents expect us to manage small stuff, and they also expect us to navigate around complex issues. And if we're struggling to manage the small stuff, how can we be expected to make difficult decisions and tackle the long-term issues facing Providence? That was really the most alarming issue, I think, for me in the City Council office as President.
City Council President David Salvatore, thank you very much for joining us on the
Tim.
program. And when we come back, he's already left his position as President of the Firefighters Union. Paul Dowding joins us on the second half of Newsmakers. Newsmakers, I'm Tim White. Joining me on the second half is the former president of the Providence Firefighter Union, Paul Dowdy. Paul, I think you've been on the show more than any mayor has ever been on Newsmakers, and that speaks to your 14 years as president. And also, you know what? It speaks to the issues that you're just so, or the union is so woven into so many issues, and we're going to get into that. But first, I want to start with you where I started with council president, and that's the Fane Tower proposal. To shelve the union part of it, just as someone who's been a firefighter for more than 3 decades, when you think of the 40-something story tower, from a firefighter's perspective, it would be the tallest building not only in the city, it would be the tallest building in the state of Rhode Island. Does the department have the capability right now of fighting a fire in a skyscraper?
Yes, I mean, we're only talking about adding about 10 stories as compared to the 3 or 4 high rises that we have that kind of define the downtown skyline. So when you look at it in that context, will we need more firefighters on scene? Yes, but I think we have close to an adequate number if we have a fire. Any fire on the upper floors is going to be a challenge because oftentimes you're required to walk and carry all your equipment up there. So we'll add what we call some reflex time to be able to get to the upper floors.
What does that mean?
In other words, if it takes me 10 minutes to walk 10 floors, now I'll be 40 minutes before I can reach the top floor. So we have to just plan ahead that the fire may burn for 40 minutes before we get up there.
Okay.
Things of that context. So at this point, I don't see any dire need related to a single building that the fire department would need to address immediately.
Well, and sure, no ladder truck can go up to a 46-story.
Correct.
So it sounds like you feel like the equipment, though, that the department has, I mean, you always need newer trucks. You always need better equipment. You're never going to say no to that. But right now, the staffing aside, the department has the right equipment.
Yeah, the fleet is old, and that's an issue, but it's a separate issue, and it's citywide. The ladder trucks can only reach to the 10th floor in a perfect setting, depending on some technicalities on how many feet each floor is. So once you get beyond 10 stories, we're walking.
Gotcha. And has the union taken a stance on the tower, or support or oppose it?
Yes, Vice President President.
He's president now.
President Derek Silva spoke in favor at the last public hearing, and I think that's a smart move.
All right, well, let's talk about Derek Silva just briefly here. What was your advice to him when I don't know if you've given any, what was it or what would it be?
Pretty simple. It was, avoid any fights, and then when it's time to fight like a tiger. Because it's easy in this business, especially with the opposition that develops kind of positionally between the union and the city typically. But when you pick the fight, it's really hard to undo the fight. So make sure it's a fight worth fighting. And then when it is, and you've made that decision, then you need to fight like hell.
Did you ever make a mistake like that? I mean, you have been pretty active, I would say, to put it politely, in politics. I can remember covering Mayor Cicilline and some pretty vicious protests for him. I remember when Hillary Clinton was coming to town, you threatened to picket that. Did you ever look back on any of those and go, you know what, I think we went too far on that?
In terms of my tactics, yes, there are a couple of those. They ultimately worked out in terms of achieving what our desired goal was, but I probably didn't need to be as abrasive at times.
All right, so we talked about a mistake. What did you view as your biggest accomplishment as president?
I think the biggest accomplishment, there were 2. One is to create a cancer ordinance that presumes any cancers are job related, because there's so much difficulty deciding and figuring out from a medical point of view of which cancers were job related and which weren't. So I take great pride in that. And the second was to create a merit system for promotion to battalion chief. So for much of my career, it was a political system. And we were able to argue, fight, organize those members, bring them into the union, which created a merit system where now they sit for a test and it's competitive. So I really think those are the 2 biggest in terms of the fire department, and then obviously the pension agreement.
I was wondering if you were going to bring that up.
Well,
you said 2, and neither of them were pension reform.
Right, because to me those really defined the fire department. They were things that were chronic problems for us throughout my tenure, the 30 years I was there. But if we look at a bigger, broader perspective, obviously it's the changes we were able to come to by agreement regarding the pension.
I feel like I ask you this every time. and I asked it at the top of the show, but look, the city is still looking at $1 billion. And you always talk about essentially remortgaging the pension debt. We've had this conversation, but we now have 6 years of being able to go back and look at where the pension stands. And as I told Council President Salvatore, the economy's been really good, and yet the unfunded liability is what it is. Did pension reform go far enough, Paul?
I did. I think at this point, and remember, as we're looking out year over year over year, which is what the city council, particularly Councilman Zuria, tried to do, was to put this out 20 years and look at that
Then
arc.
why do we need to monetize the water supply board? If
I think there's a choice there. If you have an asset that's not making money, then you have a choice, can I make money off it? But I don't know that it's necessary to fix the pension. Would it make it a better and reduce the amount, a better system and reduce the amount that's required? Yes. But the plan that Mayor Tavares and Michael D'Amico put together is working and will continue to work absent the bottom falling out of the economy.
Well, I mean, but it's going to happen. It's not a matter of, it's like, will my basement flood or get water? It's always, at some point, it's just a matter of when. We are overdue for another recession. So to say it's just a matter of whether or not that's going to happen, it's dangerous.
I think that's the time, because otherwise, to change the pension, if we look at the facts, it's relationship based. There has to be an agreement. If there's no agreement, there's no way the retirees are going to agree. I can't speak for the active members, but after what they gave back and the way that it went, I don't see any likelihood that they'd ever agree to a change. And that's where all the money is in terms of the unfunded liability. It's not with the active members, it's with the retired members. So if you look at it strategically, if you can't get buy-in from that group of people, you can't reduce an unfunded liability if we're looking at a benefit change.
So, but you know, all of this was tied into a consent decree from 2012, and in the debate a couple of weeks ago with the mayor, and he has said this before, that that consent decree, my words, has really tied the city's hands in seeking more reform. Was that the idea? By
design, yeah. Absolutely. And that's because we don't trust. We only have 8 years, ideally, that we can work with the mayor, and after that it's the next mayor who has different ideas. We watched that happen with Mayor Alonso. He came in and turned the fire department upside down. So our concern when we were making that agreement with Mayor Tavares is we want to make it upside down proof.
So last time you were on the show, you revealed you were likely not going to be running again for president. You left the door open a crack, but it was pretty clear that you weren't going to do that. There was only 30 seconds left in the show when I asked you that question. You did catch me a little flat-footed, and I asked you why. And one of the reasons you cited, just one, was a bad relationship with the mayor. We have a few more minutes now. Elaborate on that.
The union ends up being, to some degree, an embodiment of whoever's leading it. You know, it's no secret that the first couple of years with the mayor and myself weren't smooth.
But you've had friction with a lot of mayors, with Cicilline, Tavares, with Alorza. I mean, there's always going to be that friction, right? So why was this one different?
This one was different because it was out of the blue. I think there was a personal animus on the part of the Mayor Alorza, and that's what drove the change, the shift change, because I had talked to him privately about it. I had no warning that was coming. It started 3 months after he got there. He didn't have time to do any due diligence to see if it was going to work, and then so that blew up to what happened over those remaining 3 years. So it's hard, you know, when I'm swinging a baseball bat at you, it's hard to kind of rebuild that relationship. So for a lot of reasons, I had hoped to leave before that developed, but I think it's good to turn the reins over. Also, internally, the leadership needs to change. You become stale as a leader, rest on your successes. So for all of those reasons, but primarily the relationship, there's no way I'm going to have a good, effective, honest, trustworthy relationship with Mayor Alorza.
All right, so I'm going to ask you another big question with only a minute and a half left on the show. I tend to do this to you, but you know, look, I hear from rank and file, every place of employment has factions. Very true in the Providence Fire Department. And there are people there that think you just got to be too powerful. You are able to take advantage of there being not a consistent leader, not a consistent chief there, that you've taken care of your friends and, you know, all that stuff, that you were really running the fire department, not a chief. Assuming you deny that with a minute left, you know, I'm not making that sentiment up. Where do you think it comes from?
In any group of people, you're going to have people that are dissidents or dissatisfied with your leadership. Every time the union or I was forced to make a decision, there's people that supported that decision and people that don't. Often the people that don't harbor that and bring it forward. And it can't make everyone happy all the time. And I was not afraid to make decisions. I was not afraid to make decisions that people were not happy with. And sometimes my path was more circuitous than they would have wanted, quicker results, more picketing, go on strike. So sometimes I was blunt with my supporters, with the union members, and
you make
they
enemies.
don't like it. Yes,
right.
yes, and they don't forget that. They'll forgive you what the favor or when they were on the right side of the issue, but they'll never forgive you when you didn't.
Paul Dowdy, former president of the Providence Firefighters Union, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for watching. If you missed any of it, it's online. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.